Okay. All right. So it's good to know. Yeah.
Like, oh, let me fix
What's-
my skirt. Like, this is what I
Yeah,
get.
what-
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Filling in for Stuart, and they.
All right. Welcome to today's Hinckley Forum. My name is Ian Lineberry. I'm a forum host here at the Hinckley Institute of Politics. Real quick before we get started, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the Hinckley Institute. The Hinckley Institute of Politics is a nonpartisan institute here at the University of Utah. The Hinckley provides an array of transformative experiences for students through internships, forums, and classes. Hinckley forums seek to foster public discourse and civil debate on the most current and pressing issues, bringing local, national, and international thought leaders. Today's forum is titled Bills, 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 the 2023 legislative session, and we are excited to be joined by some great panelists. To begin, Speaker Brad Wilson has represented Utah's 15th House District for over a decade and currently serves as a Speaker of the Utah House of Representatives, a position he has held since 2019. A graduate of Weber State University with a degree in business, Wilson started his career in the finance industry. For the last 20 years, he has worked in real estate and commercial development and home building. Representative Angelo Romero was first elected to the Romero was first elected to the Utah legislature in 2012 and has served as the minority leader since the beginning of this year. A longtime community organizer, Representative Romero has worked to advance progressive causes, equality, and social justice in her community and has experience overseeing community organizing programs and initiatives in the Division of Youth and Family. Senator Evan Vickers started his political career by serving on the Cedar City City Council from 1987 to 1999. He was elected to the Utah House of Representatives in 2009, then the Utah Senate in 2012. He currently serves as a Senate Majority Leader. Senator Vickers is a pharmacist and small business owner by profession. He owns and operates Bullock, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, Bullock Drug and Township Pharmacy, as well as 4 other retail stores in Cedar City. Senator Escamilla was first elected in 2008, becoming the first Latina elected to the Utah State Senate and the first immigrant elected to the Utah State Legislature. The senator currently serves as a Senate Minority Leader. Prior to her legislative service, she was appointed by Governor John Huntsman as Director of the State Office of Ethics Affairs and later Ethnic Affairs. Ethnic. Oh, sorry, my bad.
That's okay. I mean, close, but.
Yeah. In the community development and in the community development group. She has served in many capacities in different boards, nonprofits, and organizations, and other agencies. Today's panel will be moderated by Jason Perry, Vice President of Government Relations, Director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics at the University of Utah. Jason has worked extensively with policymakers on the local, state, and federal level. Prior to his work at the U, Jason served as the Chief of Staff for Governor Gary Herbert. And please join me in welcoming our guests.
Yes.
So good to have you all with us. You recognize some faces out there, our panelists? All these great interns from the session. Looks like you've all recovered. Have you all recovered? Okay. It's going to be fun today, not just as we get to talk about the legislative session a little bit, but some of you get to talk about some questions you had as interns, some things you may have seen that changed your perspective a little bit. We're going to get through those today, from the themes to the bills. This is going to be good. I'm going to start with this, if you don't mind. I'm going to quote the great Speaker of the House, Brad Wilson. Are you ready for this?
This makes me nervous.
This is your tweet, Speaker Wilson. I don't say this lightly. This has been the most consequential and impactful session in the history of the state. I'm proud of the work we've done and the things we've accomplished. I want to start with that. That's a big statement, and you look at the issues in the session, there's some reasons to say that.
Do you want me to
Go
respond
ahead, Speaker.
to my
Yes,
tweet?
let's talk about that.
Well, first of all, Jason, it's great to be with you and this group of bright, talented individuals that many of which are very familiar looking.
Yes, true.
And did really great work. So thank you. You're a really important part of the process, and I hope you had a great experience. If you didn't, sorry you weren't a House intern. So, but now going back to what you asked, Jason, I have served in the legislature. This is my 13th session, and have seen a lot of different things come and go. But I can tell you, I've never seen a session where the things that we did are going to show up in the lives of Utahns in such a big and meaningful way 10, 15 years from now. And even sooner than that. But whether you're talking about the big things we did for education, both higher education and public education, the fact that there's going to be so many more resources in our education system, that's going to really benefit people down the road. Or transportation. It takes a long time to get our transportation infrastructure in this state built out. But people in a few years are going to really benefit from that. And the list goes on and on. I mean, just the really big things that were accomplished. And I was talking with Senator Vickers as we were walking in, and we were both kind of sharing that we're getting a lot of feedback that's really consistent with what I tweeted wherever we go. Like, people have noticed this was not a session that was like other sessions.
Let's talk about the sort of the themes. You hit a couple of those high points, and they are the things that impact us throughout our lives as well. Maybe Senator Vickers, let's go down the rest. Some main themes of the session that you saw from where your perspective and the people you represent.
Well, there's a number of big things we did. I mentioned tax cuts. We mentioned water, putting resources into water. Those are big items. And transportation, those are things that you have to take care of in a growing state. I'm the guy that represents rural Utah. So I'm off the Wasatch Front. I represent 5 counties in southern Utah, southern and central Utah, that are primarily rural. And so I always have to raise my hand and say, okay, not everything revolves around just the Wasatch Front. And so there were some really good things that we did for rural Utah as well. As you look at it prospectively, we did some, and we can talk about it specifically, but we put some additional money into the BNC Road Fund. Anybody here know what the BNC Road Fund is? The BNC Road Fund, we do.
All of you, just
but
the 4 of you.
The BNC Road Fund is the one that actually helps maintain roads in cities and counties. So that's the one that in our area, those are the ones that's the money that they use to chip seal roads and those kind of things. So that's a big deal. Ag optimization, there's an awful lot of there's $200 million put into ag optimization so that we can help farmers and ranchers be more efficient. And believe me, they want to be more efficient, and they have been exploring it themselves. And if we give them a little bit of money they can leverage that money 2 or 3 times and really get some positive results. So those are things. We did some things in healthcare. Senator Escamilla, I'm sure, is going to talk about one bill that she's very passionate about. Senator Romero, they have different perspectives than like I do, and we talk a lot about how our different perspectives are. I'm just this rural white guy, and we have an urban legislator that has a complete different background, and we talk a lot about how the people that we represent look at things differently in the different areas of the state.
Senator Escamilla, maybe you take a second, because I was thinking, that's where I first met you, was when you were running Office of Ethnic Affairs for the state. That's where we first got to work together.
You were in that office. You were working for Governor Dan Huntsman.
Yes, Dan Huntsman at the time.
We were in the same
you were doing
office.
this for a long time. I remember walking down the hall and seeing you.
We won't say how long.
Yes.
And thank you. It's always a pleasure coming back to the University of Utah. We're alum from both the this college, political science, and also the business school. So, and I have my intern here, Lex. He's not my intern yet, but I still count him as my intern. And he was wonderful. So thank you for all the interns that are here. And I see a lot of familiar faces that were providing public service during the whole time. And without interns, we cannot make the legislative session happen. So please know how critical that piece is. I will say, I agree with the speaker. I think this has been an incredible, just instead of substance and what we are accomplishing. And some that I think Representative Romero and myself, Leader Romero and myself may have agree that there may be some things that we are concerned of unintended consequences that we're going to have to be continue to work on moving forward. But I think on health, for example, and the good Senator Vickers and I work very closely together. We were able now to extend coverage for children. And many of you, if you've met me before, that bill has its own name. It had its own life at the Capitol. It's called the Kiddos Bill. And I credit where credit is. I could not have passed this bill without these two gentlemen, and of course Representative Romero as a sister in the fight. without their support. I mean, it's a full commitment process. And as members of the minority party, we rely heavily on our allies, on the majority. And I want to say that publicly because kids will have coverage, because Speaker Wilson made a commitment a year ago when this bill couldn't pass the House, and he was trying to help. And I want to say that he recognizes a good public policy behind that piece of legislation. Well, we made it better after working through a whole year to try to get with the people that had issues and concerns that were valid concerns. I never undermined those concerns, but we were able to make it happen. In this session now, we are covering more kids. And I think will put us nationally in one of the few states that are addressing healthcare from a perspective of social determinants of health and making sure we're closing gaps for children that have really no say where they live or who they are or who their parents are. So that's one piece that I think is monumental, and that's exciting. But on maternal health alone, we actually now have expanded Medicaid to cover moms and babies, and especially those moms postpartum, for 12 months, which is the national best practice way of helping moms. And we have many moms in our state, young moms, and without the postpartum care, it's only hurting not only those families, but also our economy, because then they have to spend more time recovering without access to postpartum care. It makes it really difficult, and you just extend those medical issues longer. So postpartum care, we did great. We did tons of work on medical cannabis, and Senator Vickers and I have known nationally now continue to have a very robust patient-focused program on medical cannabis that is successful and could potentially be the model for the national way of dealing with medical cannabis. So those are things that maybe you don't see a lot on the media, but are things that are super important for our families. And we did air quality work. I mean, we're still doing very critical work on air quality, and again, Representative Romero and myself, because we represent the area that has the worst air quality in our entire region, sometimes in the entire part of the nation, of the country, is that northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City. We are continuing to monitor, now extended that monitoring of air quality across the entire Utah Wasatch Front, and that's where UTA is. So the entire UTA service now will be collecting data per minute, instantly, and now we can help, for example, school districts make better decisions when kiddos should be outside playing or not, so that you don't have a flare on, asthma problems, and whatever is happening in, believe it or not, in parts of Salt Lake City looks very different from where you are right now in other parts of Salt Lake City. So those things need to be addressed based on data and evidence base. So those are some of the things that I think are part of, more than what you were just seeing. And there's obviously the really big themes that we can certainly talk about.
Okay, well, I'm gonna get to some of those too, but Minority Leader Angela Romero. So happy to have you in this particular role. Maybe you can talk to us for just a moment about some of those key things.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of Senator Escamilla when it comes to air quality and the University of Utah's institution we've been working on. So we asked for 1.5 million. We got 500,000 to do the air monitoring. I can't talk today, on our tracks and on our buses. And so that's something that's really important to our constituents, but it's also important to everyone else. The thing that hasn't been talked about a little bit is the work we did bipartisanly on domestic violence and sexual assault. If anyone follows my legislation, they know that that's kind of what I focus on. And so myself, Ken Ivory, Representative Ivory, Representative Johnson worked with the Lieutenant Governor, and I have a meeting with the Lieutenant Governor and the Mayor of Salt Lake City to talk about what we did in regards to domestic violence and sexual assault. And so we provided more funding than we ever have for those areas. I still think we need to provide more funding when it comes to that, particularly sexual assault, because we still have higher than national averages on that. But overall, I agree with my colleagues, like all of us work together really well, and we may not agree on things, but we have this respect for each other as colleagues. And I want to mention this before we go into anything, when George Floyd was murdered, the speaker called myself and Representative Hollins, and neither of us were in leadership, and we coordinated with Senator Vickers and Senator Escamilla, myself and Representative Hollins and the speaker to make sure that we address some issues that we could at a state level. And so I think a lot of times people like to see the headlines when we disagree on abortion, when we disagree on whether we should do private scholarships and and tie it to teachers' pay, but they don't see all this other stuff that we do behind the scenes and have the conversations that we have behind the scenes, because we are the super minority, myself and Senator Escamilla, and we represent super minority caucuses, and there's no way we could do anything without the support of our Republican colleagues. And so I think it's important to emphasize that. I'm not saying that partisan stuff doesn't happen, but overall, when I look at our leadership teams in both the Senate and the House, I'm very happy with how we're able to have honest conversations and really work side by side, even if we as the Democrats don't always get what we want.
Hey, Speaker Wilson, I think it's such an important point right there. This is a fairly unique comment that you just got from Representative Romero. I mean, how are you all, maybe I'll take just a second about how you do work across the aisle, but mostly even, you know, she talked about the super minority. There are issues when you have a super majority. I'm kind of curious how that played out this legislative session.
Well, I consider all three of these people up here good friends. And I disagree with my friends that aren't up here at times, and we can disagree with each other. And I think that gets lost a lot, as Representative Romero said in the headlines. But we actually work really well together. And the one thing that I know we do is we all share a love for the state and the people of this state. And so when we are at our best is when we're talking about how we accomplish those things together. And Representative Romero and Senator Escamilla, they are super. They might be in a super minority, but they're super. And we love working with them, and they represent their districts really, really well. It's a challenge for both of us, though. You mentioned it. You know, for them to do anything that is complex or controversial or requires a big budget appropriation, they've got to get the Republicans to come along with them. And they do that well, obviously. For us, whether it's Senator Vickers as the majority leader or me as the speaker, you know, I've got 61 Republicans out of 75 right now. And I think we all know inside that group of 61, there's a lot of ideological differences, even inside that group. And so bringing that group to coalesce around things, quite honestly, is sometimes much harder than working with the members of the minority caucus on things. And so we put a lot of time and effort into that. But at the end of the day, I believe that whether you're working across party lines or you're working within caucuses or between the House and the Senate or the governor. I had a 20-minute call with Governor Cox on the way up here about some issues. It all comes down to trust and whether or not we trust each other and trust we're going to do what we say we're going to do, and we're doing it for the right reasons. And that's the currency we trade in as lawmakers. And lawmakers that understand that and appreciate that and live according to that in terms of how they show up as a lawmaker do extremely well. And that's why these three folks are up here, is people trust them.
Yeah, I know that's true too. Yeah, Senator Vickers, yeah.
Yeah, and let me just follow up. So I learned a valuable lesson a few years ago. It's before I was in leadership, but we were running a very big bill. It had taken some significant amount of time and negotiation, and I was the Senate sponsor on the bill. And after we got through with the bill, then Senate Minority Leader Karen Main came up to me, and she said, "Do you know that if you would have included some members of the minority party in these discussions, you would have had a better bill?" And I got thinking about that, and so I tried. Once I got into leadership, we tried to set a pattern, and we've done this. The Emergency Powers Bill a couple of 3 years ago was a big bill. We included the minority members, and they were right. We had a better bill. In fact, it was kind of nice because when we got to the end of that piece of legislation, there was a contentious piece between the mayor of Salt Lake County, who's a Democrat, and what we were doing, and we recognized we need to work it out. Well, guess what? I didn't even have to go to that negotiation. Senator Escamilla and Senator Iwamoto took it on, and they're the ones that worked it out, so I hope the better. But, let me just, the last day of the session, we had Pamela Atkinson come and give a prayer in our Senate, and she's an amazing person. I don't know that I've ever met the more just a Mother Teresa type person in my life. She's a humanitarian and she's just a wonderful person. But she said something that I wrote down and it stuck with me. She says, a difference of opinion is a great opportunity to learn. You know, think about that for a minute. You know, and so because we have differences of opinion within our, whether it's within our caucus, between bodies, with the governor, with minority party, it doesn't matter. But keep that in mind as you go through life. That if you have number one, you need to know the perspective of the other people you're dealing with, and then learn from those opinions. Now, it may not change your position. You may not change where you're at on it, but it'll help you understand better.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk for a moment about money, too. One of the interesting things about it is, first, how much we had. $28 billion budget. I remember when I first started working with some parts of state government on it, was about a $13 billion budget. I can't believe how big this is. And what's interesting is the connection of money to policy. And what's good about this year is sometimes the policy is what is put forward, and then the money follows it, as opposed to the money driving all the policy. So I'm kind of just curious if each one of you take a second, the budget priorities that will have the biggest impact that you helped fund this year. Senator Escamilla, can we start with you? Just what you see impacting us the most through the money.
Thank you. And yes, so 29 billion, wow, a little bit more than 29. And I think it's probably going to be the highest. We're not going to see those numbers probably. I mean, you need to keep in mind there's all the federal funds that came in, and so they're going to be a different conversation next year and the following years. And it's a good exercise. So I've been involved in the budget for almost the entire time I've been in the legislature, for 15 sessions now. And this has been an interesting process. And sometimes when you have more money, it's more problematic because there's more requests. It's kind of like the nature of that process. But I would say some of the pieces related to tax reform were very important. And I think they've been missed on the other conversations that as Democrats, for years been asking for, the repeal on tax on food, sales tax on food, mm-hmm. And Social Security and, other earned income tax credits that we think are super critical for the working poor families. And they passed this year. You're probably going to see that no Democrat voted for those bills. So I think that's important, and we can get into deeper conversations of that. It had to do with the way it was tied to other pieces of legislation, which in this case are the repeal and the earmark, which will go to the ballot for the public to vote in 2024. So as difficult as that was for us as Democrats, and we came all together as both caucuses on this, it was issues that we felt very passionate about, but we didn't think that policy conversation of tying to the earmark was appropriate. We felt they needed to stand on their own as policy conversations, but I'm sure my colleagues on the other side have a different perspective, and we had lengthy conversations on this. So I say that because the most important thing we do is balancing a budget every single year. You guys don't ever have to worry. We're not Washington. We don't spend more money than what we have. That is so important, and it's a large, big piece of what we do, probably, to me, the most important thing we do. And then we did all these social services pieces. We are investing in a lot of infrastructure, not only infrastructure of roads and buildings, but also infrastructure in social services. And we need that because we're going to be facing some other difficult issues related to mental health and behavioral health, especially for our young children and youth. So just this last session, aside from postpartum care for moms, we also put a $15 million investment on home visiting programs for families to get some triage and assessment to make sure that they're equipped so they can be better, parents and better parenting skills and help their kiddos start on a good early childhood education component. We put more funding on programs that are helping 4-year-olds. Full day kindergarten, guys, that's amazing. So yeah, this is where we're gonna see, like the speaker was saying, this 15 years to 20 years from now, some of the consequences coming from this really good policy. Because we had the funding, we were able to now fund some of these programs. So those are some that I think are critical.
Can we break this down for just a second, maybe for the sake of the people watching and those that weren't on the Hill, about these two pieces you just talked about. This constitutional earmark for education, including some higher ed, children, disabilities, and the food tax. Who would like to just explain what's happening there and what we're going to see on our ballot? Who wants to take it?
I can maybe set some context for it real quick, Jason. Can I just super quick, though, just answer your question you asked Senator Escamilla? I'll be really quick.
Yeah, you can do whatever.
So When you
You're
think
the
about, well, I know, but
Okay.
he's Director Perry. He's a big deal. Look at his portrait over there.
I love my macaroni portrait.
Your budget, whether you're a family or a business or government, reflects your values. And our budget this year as a legislature reflected the values that the legislature espoused. And so, biggest increase for teachers in the history of the state. All-day kindergarten. We value education, we value our kids. We value the citizens of this state being able to pay their bills. Biggest tax cut by a factor of 3 in the state's history. Everybody in the state of Utah will pay less taxes. And we think that's a value. We'll make government a little smaller, let people spend money the way they want to. We value our natural resources, $500 million in water. I mean, the list goes on, but when you look at what we did, this budget, more than any I've been involved with, really reflects, I think, a broad set of values of the state of Utah. And so you can't look very far into it and see the things that are important to us as a state. To the question around constitutional earmark and taxes, we had a lot of new money. We had about $1.8 billion of additional what we call ongoing money, which is ongoing growth in state tax revenues. 1.7 billion of that was income tax, 100 million of that was sales tax. In our state, we pay for everything almost with sales tax other than education. And as the fastest growing state in the country, when your sales tax isn't growing like the economy is growing, our citizens expect us to be able to pay for courts and pay for corrections and pay for natural resources and take care of water and take care of roads. And so we've got this constitutional earmark that says you can't use income tax money for most of those things. And so because our economy is growing so fast, income tax is on afterburners right now, and we were able to fund education at record levels, more than we've ever funded, both in terms of dollar amounts and probably percentages. And the constitutional earmark question basically says this: can we give the state more flexibility by not having that earmark be quite so structured, and let the legislature use income tax once it has paid for growth and inflation and education? Can they use income tax for other state needs? And so that's the question. And the reason it's tied to taking the sales tax off food is it would be irresponsible, in my opinion, to take the sales tax off of food when our sales tax isn't growing at all as a state in real terms. It's not even barely keeping up with inflation. So that's why those two things are tied together. 100 million in sales tax growth, 1.7 billion in income tax growth. You can't take the sales tax off food if you're not going to give more flexibility to the state with income tax. So that's why they're tied together.
We'll see that in the next election.
Fall of '24, voters will get a chance to vote on that. But embedded in that is also constitutional language that says the legislature will, and this isn't in the Constitution now, the legislature will prospectively fund growth and inflation for public education as long as there's revenue. And that,
So that language will go inside.
that will go in the
constitutional
Constitution,
amendment.
and education doesn't have that now. And so the reason that you've seen 2 of the 3 education stakeholder groups be supportive of this, and the third is neutral right now, is they're like, that's amazing language to have in our Constitution, which we don't have today.
Okay. Senator Vickers and then Representative Romero, funding items you think will have the biggest impact?
Well,
We haven't talked about
that one's obviously
other-
big. That's
other
a
than
big
what-
decision.
yeah.
And so, to put things in perspective, Utah's been very fortunate in the last few years. We've had a lot of money and a lot of new money. But last year, the growth in the economy was only 1.2, 1.3%. But yet, the state of Utah had a significant amount of money. We're one of the few states that separate money into ongoing and one-time. You'll find that the legislature never spends one-time money on an ongoing project. So we don't buy salaries with one-time money. So let me ask the question, why does the state of Utah have so much money? If the growth was only this much, why did we have this much money? We didn't spend it. So about what's it been, 6 years ago, President Niederhauser kind of, at that time was the Senate president, he kind of introduced us to the concept of working rainy day funds, and we'd been using some of those, but we actually park a lot of money. So a lot of money that we put into one-time projects, whether it be a building or a road, even water, that's some ongoing money that we put into those projects. So we know that there's some kind of a downturn coming, and in fact, the last quarter's projection was flat. Well, so that's an indication that we're heading into some kind of a downturn. But if that happens, if we put ongoing money into a one-time project, we have that money, we can pull it back. You can pull it back from a road or a building or water if you have to do some things with it. So those are important things, you know, and the big things we talked about, you know, and the speaker did a nice, eloquent job of outlining how we look at things. But, you know, and here again, I mentioned a few things we've done for rural Utah. And that's very important perspective for those people who live just off the Wasatch Front. And we did some nice things. And we mentioned, you know, water optimization. We mentioned some B&C things, so help with transportation. All these health-related issues will also help rural Utah. We did some specific things that will be helping with the dental program, working with the dental school here at the University of Utah. And so those are some things that just keep that in perspective, though, that the state of Utah, we've taken this approach of not necessarily spending our money, and definitely when we do spend it, we spend it, you know, judiciously.
And I would agree, we definitely are fiscally conservative, but it's how we spend the money where I think you'll see the Democrats and the Republicans disagree on that. And the speaker did an eloquent job of explaining that. But when we look at classroom sizes and hopefully full-day kindergarten stuff, we'll change that, and teacher pay, and we can talk about the budget piece of it, but we also have to look at all the legislation that came forth through with some of the bills that really didn't make teachers feel good about what they were doing, didn't really make teachers feel like they were trusted. And so it's easy for us to say we're giving raises, we're investing all this money in education, but if the people who are in those roles don't feel supported, what does that money really do long term, and how does it really impact the diverse populations we have here in the state of Utah? So I just want you to think about that when you're thinking about whether you want to get rid of that earmark or not. The one thing I will agree on when it comes to transportation, we focus a lot more on active transportation. So if you don't know what active transportation that is, it's mass transit, it's other forms of transportation besides cars, because we really have to think about the world we're going to leave you and people after you. And so that's something we have to look at as we grow as a state, is how do we get people from place to place? And part of that, and this is something that nobody really talks about, is transmission lines. And so I know we invested some money in updating our transmission lines, and what kind of power are we going to use as we move forward? And so those are areas you'll see us disagree on a lot as well. But I think it's important for all of you to think about, when you turn on that light, where does that electricity come from? And how do we move forward as a state? How do we diversify our energy portfolio? Because the things we do, even me driving up here on my own in my Subaru, how does that impact the environment here? And what are we going to be leaving the future here in Utah? So we can talk about budget and we can talk about these accomplishments, but there's a give and take when we talk about these things. So for some, they may see like, yeah, this is great, but for others, they might have a different opinion. So I think that's the important part, is for us to be critical thinkers when we're talking about these policy and budget issues.
It was nice of you to talk about driving up here and not mentioning the parking.
No.
Okay.
I will say, Jason, I think for your audience, though, I mean, we talk about the budget and it reflects our values. I think this group probably knows this, but we really do value higher ed. And even though I am a proud and loyal Wildcat, the U is a place that I love. And it's our flagship institution. And we funded the most expensive, at least from a state level contribution, higher education building in the state's history up here this year, computer science building.
You did.
And something that has been in the works for longer than the folks in this room, most of them have been alive, is trying to give the University of Utah the ground up above here so you can grow your campus. And we've never in the history of the state given a university $100 million to grow their campus. And The reason I bring that up is, I mean, this is a really important institution to our state, and we have a lot of confidence in President Randall and the students here, and we want to see this institution continue to grow.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning that too, particularly also with Fort Douglas that that $100 million will be used for. And to your point, I'll just say on behalf of the University of Utah, this was the most money that the university has ever received in any legislative session for these priorities. So I was very grateful to all of you for what you did there. So before we get ready to have questions from the crowd, just maybe one really quick thing, because I think it's just kind of fun, is I love referendums. Just to talk about, okay, that's not the right way to say it. Okay, I love to talk about these a little bit here, because I'm curious about two things. Any bills the governor is going to veto that we know of, not that you're worried about it, just that or that you want. So we're going to do this really quick because I want this.
We don't have time for that question.
Okay, never mind.
So
Never mind. Okay, we'll take that back. So just really quickly on that one, because I want some student questions, if that's okay. And then we do have one potential referendum in the works, apparently, on the state flag. They're going to need 130. Some of you saw that. Any of you have a tattoo of the new state flag? Okay.
Did you see my eye roll?
Let's see. I don't know if I felt it. Okay. They will need 134,298 signatures by April 12th. All right. Any vetoes? Any chance of that? Anyone?
Can I jump on the flag, please?
Okay,
Because I was part of the flag commission, so by design, I got a call from the president. It's like, you've been assigned to this. And you love when you get a call from the president. I'm like, of course, why am I going to say no? So and I see the Democrats took a really interesting approach to the flag. It was never we were never looking to change the flag. We're like, dude, we're trying to fund Medicaid. Like, leave us alone with the flag. But there was a huge appetite, and went through multiple versions of different bills, different people. And by the time it passed, right, and we're like, okay, we're here. Now we have to participate on this process. So I can tell you about the process to get us where the flag is now, from the moment we passed the bill saying there will be a new flag. And it was inclusive. And I've been in a lot of projects and a lot of processes, and I have to credit where credit is. I mean, we put this effort to get more than 5,000 entries alone on designs, many of them coming from kiddos in our state. Like, a lot of our children participated, people from all over the state. So the process itself was a process that included everyone, as many people that wanted to participate. There were a lot of different languages involved, and communities, engagement. And I think we put there was a huge effort on that. And then it was like, what do you go from there to actually make it so it's marketable? So some of us have some business marketing degrees. We know that the current flag is beautiful, and I love that flag. I probably purchase more of those flags to do as gifts than anybody else. I probably do have an account already with them. I love giving that flag as a gift. I'm so proud of that flag. It's a gorgeous flag, but we're not getting rid of that flag. You're just now providing a different flag that can be more marketable, that you can now recognize anywhere in the world. Like, we recognize Texas, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. I mean, those just more, from a design perspective, make more sense. You can put it on a t-shirt, you can put it on a hat, whatever the case is. So to me, a referendum of the flag, I'm like, oh, for reals? I'll tell you of a referendum and then be quiet for a minute. Because one of the things where people are now gathering signatures is, I don't know if you guys were following, but I did run the magic mushroom bill, the psilocybin bill.
And now, you did.
Yeah, so now you have people, that are, I know people are staring at me. Every time I say that, there's like a moment. But I would love to chat more about that. And I think there is like some interesting science behind that. The Johns Hopkins University has 20 years of data on that. But now you have people gathering signatures to try to take the approach of the medical cannabis process. And I think we learn a lot from the medical cannabis process, that it's sometimes better to work in a more...
I thought we were talking about the flag.
I'm just like...
We're talking about mushrooms.
No, it's magic mushrooms.
Now we're talking about cannabis.
Cannabis and
What I'm
flags.
saying is flags and mushrooms come together, and what I'm saying
fly
is
high.
They all fly high, fly high. So, yeah. It's like it's the magic mushrooms. I'm telling you. No, that
Take that mic away.
guys, it's gonna be well. So what I'm saying is, you have people concerned about the flag, and then you have people concerned about mental health and magic mushrooms. So there, you may have a lot of those in this
It's gonna be
election
so.
cycle.
Okay, we'll be ready for those next ones. I think it's also fun that our one pharmacist from the University of Utah in the legislature is the medical cannabis person. Okay, Representative Romero?
I just want to point out that this is where bipartisan stuff comes in. The House needed the Democrats to help them pass the flag bill. And if we wouldn't have worked together, that bill wouldn't have passed. So I think at times, people say, you're the super minority, but there are situations like that where our votes counted. So nothing on the magic mushrooms.
So just
Did you have a
real
comment there,
quick,
sir?
Jason, so I'm the one guy on the panel that didn't vote for the flag bill. But it was interesting. We could not necessarily had a strong opinion about it, but I do a survey every year of my constituents in the 5 counties that I represent. I had 1,000 people respond. I had more people that didn't care than wanted to change the flag. So, and I had one very important constituent that really did not like the changing of the flag, and that was my wife.
Yeah.
But at the same token, now that that legislation is passed, I look at it like other pieces of legislation. Why don't we just embrace the concept and see if we can't make it the very best possible? Because it did. The majority of the legislature voted for it. So, that's my thought.
But it is fair. I mean, the referendum is part of our process. I actually find them super interesting as well, and we'll see what happens. And if that's what happens, that's great. But it is what it is.
Tall hurdle by a short
Well,
amount of
and
time.
it creates a new business. I mean, like now gathering signatures is a whole market, guys. So it's opening businesses, and some of us are entrepreneurs. I'm like, well,
Oh,
look at
it's an
that.
economic development effort, isn't it? Okay. Thank you for that. Hey, do you mind some questions from our students? So say your name, because we have people watching online too. Just say your name if you don't mind. And Nick, who's going to do it? Ian's going to pass it around. So Ian's in charge.
Watch out.
Okay, go.
Phil Donahue, he wouldn't know what that means.
So just name.
Yeah, name's great.
Okay.
And your question.
Hi, my name is Deanne Bahati. I'm currently a sophomore. A question that I have, you guys kind of like touched a lot on it, because as an activist here in Salt Lake, I get a lot of like very radicalized opinions that come at me, or where I see on social media as well. Like how you talked about with the titles, like they don't really tell the full story and what's actually going on, and people are actually like fighting for their lives at the Capitol. And so what is something that you have picked up and learned in your position of just working in legislature? Things that you just did not know. Like I was saying, for example, like for me, I did not know how hard people are actually fighting at the Capitol, every single one, despite whatever opinions they have. So I guess my question is, what are some things that you have learned and surprised you being in your position?
Nice.
So I can just maybe just start that real quickly, but when I mentioned that listening to other people and learning from them, I've learned so much from the people on this panel, but others as well in our body, just by listening, and kind of getting a perspective. And like I say, I have people come to me that are extremely passionate about a particular issue. I might see that from a different perspective, but if we can talk it through, then usually you find out you're about in the same spot, and you can if you talk like this, it usually doesn't work so well. But if you talk it out and try to understand the other person's position, usually you end up in a spot where you both agree.
Anyone else?
Liz knows. So I'm a product of the University of Utah, and I got my bachelor's here. I have a political science degree and a minor in Chicano studies, and I have an MPA from here as well. So I always look at systems and how systems work and how systems, and this relates to a bill that recently passed that Senator Escamilla and I don't agree with, that was from a freshman legislator who wanted to school how teachers talk about race and other issues of oppression in schools. And so for me, coming from an activist perspective and then being a policymaker, I've kind of have to change my lenses. And so like sometimes I have my personal opinions and I feel very passionately about certain things, and I hate that bill, to be honest with you. But I know I'm gonna have to compromise with my colleagues and hopefully make it less intrusive from my perspective. Hopefully, the governor will veto it. I don't think that's going to happen. I was on the phone with his policy person the other day. But for me, I had to kind of learn how to not see the world from like a Chicana nationalist perspective, and really see the world like it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray. And so I've kind of had to, Bell Hooks is one of my favorite feminists. That's how I think, and I think from the margins. And so I never see myself as center, and if anyone who knows Bell Hooks understands what I'm saying. But in order for me to change these systems, I have to be part of the solution. And so it may not get there the way I want it to, but I'm gonna continue to advocate for the issues I care about and educate and work with my colleagues. And we're not gonna always agree on everything, but I'm gonna continue to have that voice. And sometimes that voice scares people. I can tell you, there are a lot of stereotypes about who I am. And like people are like, oh, I'm afraid of you, or you're spicy. And it's just like, they don't realize those words are offensive, or they're like, you're a warrior. And they don't realize sometimes that they're offending me when they're saying these things. And so we have a long way to go, but Senator Escamilla and I are very different people. My family's from New Mexico. We've always been in the United States of America. She's the first immigrant ever elected. We have different lived experiences, and I'm sure Senator Vickers and the Speaker have different lived experiences. And so I think those voices come to the table. It's really changed my way on how I see we do policy. It's not either or. It's about that compromise and the art of compromise in between. And things aren't gonna happen as fast as I want it, but I'll continue to be up there to be that voice. And the majority leader knows, the Speaker say, because I call him all the time, like, what? And I won't say what I say, is going on here, but at least we get to have these conversations. And that's what I appreciate about Senator Vickers and the Speaker, is they were open to have those conversations, especially when we were dealing with issues around George Floyd and the murder, and how we move forward, and how we move forward when we talk about transgender issues, how we move forward when we talk about all these complicated social justice issues that many of us feel we still, the legislature should have no business in, or the legislature has to regulate. So it's a fine line you have to walk.
Excellent. Go ahead, Ian.
All right, so my name's Jasper Rugemer, and I have a question about lithium here in Salt Lake. So what bills have existed in the past, or are you guys interested or looking forward to implement a bill that, for instance, makes the lithium that we have an abundance of here in Utah available to the markets to boost Utah's economy?
So we do have lithium in the state, and it's a really important mineral, obviously. One of the challenges is it's most abundant and most readily mined from the Great Salt Lake. And so the most typical way to mine lithium depletes a tremendous amount of water, which the Great Salt Lake can't afford to lose right now. We did pass a bill, Representative Snyder out of Cache County passed a bill that does a couple of things. One is it creates a severance tax on lithium. So when you sever that mineral from the state of Utah, a tax is going to be paid to the state that could then be used to help deal with the offset and maybe help find water to offset the severance of that mineral from the state. It also creates a framework around some parameters about how much water can be depleted from lithium. It's an interesting balance because lithium is going to be needed more and more in our future as a country, but we can't subordinate our needs as a state or the Great Salt Lake needs to our nation's lithium needs. And so we're trying to find that right balance, and I think we are on a pretty good path there.
Sorry, it took me a minute because remember I graduated from pharmacy school up in the hill. I'm thinking about mental health drugs. Lithium's a mental health drug, so I'm going, wait a minute. So it took me a minute to get back there. So.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
that
Well
lithium.
I think you said it great.
Okay, that's good. Okay, we have one more. Ian, do your thing.
Hi, I'm Lex Hernandez Neatling, senior here at the U. I have sort of an outlook question. What are some of the more pressing matters you think are going to come up during the interim? I know in the past week or two since session is closed on a nationwide scale, we've seen some financial institutions struggle, and that's probably a direct reflection of the market or financial market. But tying everything back, what's kind of the most important thing you guys see coming up during the interim?
For me, it's the economy and everything pertains to it, including banking. But remember, when we do the budget, we talk about spending a lot of money. We're not spending real money. We're spending projection. You know, it's money that's projected to come in. And so if the economy turns south in any way, shape, or form, including some kind of a banking run, that could disrupt everything we did.
You know, this is a great piece of conversation, what happened with Silicon Valley Bank and, you know, being the 16th largest bank in the country, and the impact it had on our own Silicon Slopes companies, right? So, and in my previous life, I worked 14 years for Science Bank, and my last responsibility was to create this financial relationship between Science Bank and Silicon Slopes. So we were like in the mode of following a lot of what Silicon Valley Bank was doing, and we wanted to be that Silicon Valley Bank, but having it here in Utah. And ironically now, after this happened, which I'm of course not employed anymore by them, but following what was taking place and listening to the meetings they immediately took place, you know, the Science Bank's Scott Anderson, which is the CEO, and he's wonderful. He's like an icon here in our state. Now Science Bank is kicking in and saying, hey, we're here to serve you all Silicon Slopes companies. We won't let you down, and we're here to help you. As an entrepreneur, there's nothing more scary than having everything that you have in your company and now hearing that the financial institution, right, is trembling and potentially like close, which is what happened Thursday last week. And the feds immediately came in. Of course, some of those funds are secure, right, through the FDIC, securing those deposits and funds, but up to a certain amount. So, but the feds immediately said, we will cover everyone. What does that mean for Utah? It's a huge deal for Utah, and I think that's why it's been so much talked about, is because of Silicon Slopes. And if you've seen the trend in our tech companies, we've seen a lot of layoffs. But I have to say, I was really concerned when those layoffs started happening in the last quarter of last year. And I'm like, what do they know that I don't know? Like, what do they know that we don't know? And part of it is they are like, you know, to the Senator Vickers' point, because actually our economists, which we have amazing economists that work for us, part of what we didn't talk is the staff. We don't, you know, we're not here 104 people making all this happen. We have incredible high quality economists and attorneys, hundreds of them working for the state legislature to make what we do happen. And they're very concise. I mean, they've been long enough in this world to know these trends from economic trends. And I think what happened in 2008 with housing, and some of us were in that legislature, cutting budgets year after year, and it was the most heartbreaking thing to do. We're not gonna have another housing crisis, and there are more experts on housing, the speaker probably, than me, but I think we're gonna see some on technology. And it has to do also with the geopolitical world that we live in, with China being where it is right now in our relationship with China, and how we're now, you know, the federal government not asking China, hey, you guys need to sell, you know, the company that owns TikTok, for example, you guys have to, it cannot be owned anymore by, you know, Chinese nationals. We have to like figure this out for the well-being of the world. So all of that is now impacting technology and innovation, and we just have to be smart on how we do that. I love that we have very secure financial institutions like Science Bank coming and saying, we will help. We're not gonna leave you guys out there. But just think about being an entrepreneur in the tech world, and those venture, you know, the type of risks that they have to take are really high. And that's why you have, you know, the Silicon Valley Bank, they were taking those high risks, and something went wrong. I think there's a lot of things that we can learn. I'm sure there's a case study already being drafted at Harvard School of Business or whatever that's happening. But we need to make sure that it doesn't repeat again. We can't have our economy be shaken like that when financial institutions fail like that. Sorry, I have like a whole...
No, my phone's going off.
Oh,
Is that yours?
Yeah.
Speaker, Representative Romero, the last comments on this.
Well, go ahead, Representative. Anything you want to add?
No, I mean, we saw what COVID also did. So we're recovering from COVID and the federal government, and now to see this. My concern is the new district I have is the most diverse district in the state, and it's just making sure that people can take care of their families. And so not from the venture capitalist perspective, but for the people that work for them, or the people, or, you know, I have people talking to me about, I can't by aches, you know. So for me, it's the working people, the people that we survive because they carry us on their backs. And so I am worried about how inflation and how this fall will impact them.
This is maybe a little bit of an indirect answer to your question about what we're going to worry about, but let me just maybe share some inside baseball. Some of you know how things work, at least to a certain extent, but I snuck away to St. George for the weekend to get a little sunshine, and this thing all starts to happen. And Saturday, I get a call from the governor, and Saturday night at 10 o'clock at night, the president, the speaker, the governor, our staff are all on a Zoom call talking about what's the state's response going to be if, all of a sudden 350 tech companies in the state can't make payroll. And that spilled into Sunday with a whole bunch of Zoom calls with our staff and our attorneys. And then, things progressed over the weekend. And Monday morning, we do a Zoom call with the tech sector. And you've got the whole federal delegation and state leaders and trying to kind of soothe the nerves of people, because we do care a lot about these companies and their employees, and they're an important part of our economy and and that sector, like other sectors, we value a lot. But that is kind of what the interim does to us, right? It throws us curveballs, and we've got to respond. And hopefully, this issue, I think it is going to be disruptive. I'm on a bank board. I actually just left that meeting. The banking industry is still in a lot of turmoil, and it will be for a while. And that's going to affect the state, and we will probably have to deal with it. But there are other things, and I would just say the headline, other than the kind of reactionary stuff, is we are going to continue to be the fastest growing state in the country. And so as a legislature, it's really incumbent upon us to not forget that, to keep thinking about how to lead the state through that, to ensure that everyone that lives in Utah has the same quality of life that brought Ian's parents to Utah from Illinois, because they wanted to live in a place like this. We were talking about this beforehand. And it's our job to make sure that everyone can have that same experience here.
Thank you for your comments today. I was going to make a final note, too. We talked about the great efforts on behalf of the University of Utah from the legislature, but so you all know as well, because of that funding, no tuition increase through the entire system of higher education because of that funding that came to the universities, which we're grateful for as well. We're so glad that many of you are able to be interns during this legislative session. I know you've learned a lot. I hope you'll learn the kind of things that make you run for office one day, okay? Because we need you. We'll help. We know where to find interns when you do, all right? Let's give a hand to this great panel. We're so grateful. Thanks.
Oh, really?
Nice to meet you. Great question.
Thank you.
I love Bell Hooks. Yeah, she's my favorite.
Are you trying to have a family? She's good, but well, let us know if we can help them out with the funding and stuff. And I feel like
I think it's kind of